Yo, what's going on guys? HyperX here, and today I want to talk about Wo Long. I want to talk about my impressions because I've recently had a chance to go hands-on with the game. Admittedly, it was a demo build, so not the full thing, but I fortunately had a chance to run through, and in the demo it was actually pretty extensive. It allowed me to create a character, run through the tutorial, dive into the first stage, and then of course run through there, battling a lot of enemies, fighting some tougher mobs, working my way to a boss, and then throughout the demo I had a chance to test a variety of different things, equipment, weapons, summons, different magical abilities. Honestly, it gave me a really good cross-section of what this game has to offer. Admittedly, without having played the whole thing, I don't know how much it extends beyond that point, i.e. are there more summons, how many more skills are there, how many more weapon types are there? There are of course lots of questions, but in this video I want to talk about my initial impressions because I am super impressed with this game. I love these kinds of games, these Soulsborne games, whether it be Dark Souls, Sekiro, Neo, of course Elden Ring, things like that. It is a genre that I really do enjoy. I get my butt kicked a hell of a lot of the time, and your boy is not very good at parrying, but regardless, I enjoy this genre. So, with that being said, let's go through some of my impressions. If you guys do enjoy this, a like would be super appreciated. If you want to see more from this game, we have a ton of content coming your way, going over loads of things. Some of the videos are already on the channel, more of them will be uploaded soon after this one, so if you're excited for Wo Long and you want to learn more, definitely stick around. So to begin with, let's go through some initial thoughts. First things first, again, diving into the game with character creator. The game has a pretty extensive character creator. If you guys played, say, Neo 2 and you messed around with that, then you can expect similar sorts of things. Various different facial options, sliders, eye color, irises, hairstyles, facial hair, definitely sort of more facial hair than you would normally expect from one of these kind of games. Things like scars, other stuff like that. You have wrinkles, facial details, of course, different things with the bodies. Basically, there's quite a lot of things to mess around with. And then of course, once you follow on from there, you then get to choose one of the 5 phases. 5 phases is kind of a core pillar in this game that of course works into sort of Chinese mythology. And those 5 phases are fire, wood, water, metal, and earth. When you start the game, you basically pick one of the 5 phases. This is not something you're locked into. This is basically just a means to sort of initially distribute your stats. So you can see it or sort of liken it to, say, choosing one of the starting classes in, say, a Souls style game. Fire is a lot more offensive, wood is more support focused, earth is more defensive, that kind of thing. And then of course, when you do select these, this also ties into your choice of summon and also your choice of wizardry abilities. Summons, again, if you played Neo, will be similar to, say, your guardian spirit. Again, these can also be changed when you go to the in-game version of the quote-unquote bonfire or the shrine, which in this case are the battle flags. You can then go and you can swap to different divine beasts. And again, you then also have your wizardry abilities, which also fall within these different elemental categories, the different 5 phases. So you will then pick and choose those based on how you distribute your stats and of course the skills that you like. You have things that are offense focused, defense focused, support focused, loads of different things like that. And honestly, it is really, really cool. But one of the first things that of course jumps out to me is the combat. Combat in this game feels incredible, but it is also pretty tough early on. I will say this is one of those games that is very, very focused on deflect and or parrying. Parrying is basically at the crux of this game, in a similar manner to sort of when people first played Sekiro, and of course people said, this is a game where you kind of really need to learn to parry, otherwise you're going to have a bad time. That also applies in this game. In some of the other games, things like, say, you know, Dark Souls or Neo or things like that, you can make like tanky builds and be like, you know what, parrying isn't my strong suit, I'm going to brute force this. And to a degree, you probably can do the same in Wo Long. Of course, admittedly, I haven't had a chance to sort of test out the full breadth of skills, but I will say, early on, if you don't at least sort of get a good feel for deflecting, not to say you have to become a parry god, but at least if you don't get a good feel for basic deflection, you are going to have a tougher time. Enemies are very defensive, they will block a lot of your attacks, they're also very aggressive at the same time, and you'll often get sort of comboed into various different strings that will lead to your death. So if you don't know how to properly deflect, then again, you're going to have a hard time. But the deflection system works really well. Again, it sort of ties nicely into the style of game, into the fact this is sort of very like Chinese martial arts driven. So it's actually quite fluid when you get it going, because the idea of deflect is to sort of push your opponent into an opposite direction. The whole game revolves around this sort of spirit meter that sits at the bottom of your screen. And basically when you are attacking enemies, you are gaining positive spirit. And of course this moves you into the blue. Meanwhile, when you perform powerful attacks, martial arts, wizardry abilities or spirit attacks, that then consumes your spirit and will push you into the sort of of negative side of things. And enemies also have the same principle, so of course when you're attacking and deflecting them, you're basically giving them negative spirit, which puts them into a sort of more vulnerable state. So really, you're in this sort of a balancing act of spirit, which is actually quite cool because in other games you may have like a magic meter or something like that that'll be used to perform these abilities. Meanwhile, this time you can, technically speaking, perform them whenever you want, but doing so without sufficient spirit will push you into the negative side of things, which then again potentially sets you up later on to be punished. Because of course, if you've then gone and spammed a few abilities, you've got low spirit, then someone comes over and deflects you or sort of attacks you, you're probably going to be put into that sort of vulnerable state and then be punished as a result. So it is a really, really cool system. Might sound a little complicated at first. Once you get a feel for it, it's really, really quite fluid. In addition to that, aesthetically, the game just looks hella cool. Again, I love my Chinese martial arts, so all that kind of stuff just looks really, really nice. They've done a fantastic job of the environments, the enemies, the armor pieces. There's a ton of different weapons for you to mess around with. Again, in the demo, I got a chance to sort of test out, I think sort of 5 or 6 different weapon types. There were short swords, long swords, curved swords, dual swords. There was a polearm, but I would imagine in the full game, maybe there will be more. You know, Neo has a pretty sort of extensive range of weapons, but in the demo, they were the only ones that I seemed to get to drop. On the topic of dropping items, loot-wise, it works in a very similar manner again to Neo. So of course you go around, you kill enemies, you get a variety of different gear pieces, and of course they come in different rarities, they have different bonuses on, so you will once again be playing sort of an inventory manager, I would imagine, at the end of the stages, because you do get quite a lot of things. But that's also pretty cool because all of the different weapons also have different martial arts on them, because that's the other layer of this game. You have your basic attacks, which is normal and spirit. You then have your wizardry abilities, which are the spells that you can then use that are sort of tied to the 5 phases, and then of course you can use these to dish out damage, buff your weapons, buff your team, other things like that. And you then have martial arts, which are tied to the weapons, which you can kind of liken to, say, Elden Ring's Ashes of War. They're weapon abilities, and as you get rarer weapons, better quality weapons, they'll actually carry 2 martial arts, and these are basically flashy moves that again will also consume spirit, but will basically do a great deal of damage. They also look really cool, and again, different weapons have different abilities, so when you start finding ones you like, that's also going to infer your weapon choices. One of the things I really liked about this game as well is, this is a Soulsborne style game. So one of the core sort of tenets that underpins that is that, you go out, you fight tough enemies, you then accumulate this game's version of souls, which is called genuine chi. And then of course on top of that, you also gain morale. Now when you die, you lose some morale and you lose your genuine chi. Genuine chi is the item you use to level up, basically your soul's currency. But morale is also really important because this is a system that sort of is independent of your actual physical character level, but it will increase as you go. And when you get higher morale, this not only improves your combat strength, but also unlocks the ability to use some of the more powerful wizardry spells. However, again, when you die, your morale can drop. It won't drop back to 0, but it can decrease. So if you've gone through and you've just got to like morale 19 and you died to a couple of things, that can drop down to 18 and go down. So this, of course, is a system that you need to combat. But again, if you played sort of Soulsborne games before, you're used to the fact that when you die, you go back to your location, grab your stuff, and you carry on. This time around, it works slightly differently in that if you are killed by an enemy, that enemy then gets a morale boost, and you then have to go back and defeat them in order to get your stuff back. Now, they haven't made it too unfair because that only applies if it's a trash mob, if it's a regular enemy just around the world, you go and kill them, you then get your morale back, get your genuine chi back, and you're good. If it's a boss, you simply need to enter the boss arena. They're not going to be super harsh and say, you must defeat this boss next if you want your stuff back, because that would be real unfair. But the actual system to sort of play on a traditional formula, honestly, I really like it. And again, it sort of really synergizes well with this type of game. Basically, you're going back to defeat the person that took you out to regain your honor. I think, honestly, it's really cool. And while morale again does link to your combat strength, and this of course is something that can go up and down, they have thought about a way to sort of allow you to at least create a buffer for this, because as you go throughout the stages and you find the flags, and you basically put your flags in those standards and sort of create them as like checkpoints, you also bolster this thing called your fortitude rank, and your fortitude rank is basically like a buffer or a blocker, and your morale cannot drop below your fortitude rank. So provided you're going around finding all of the flags, doing things like that, you can get to a point whereby, or at least what I did in the demo, was I got my fortitude rank to 20, my morale rank to 20, which then meant even if I died, my morale would not go lower than 20. So of course you can use that as a means to basically give you some breathing room as you progress. But overall, I was really impressed with this. Again, I have only played this for, a number of hours, hours. I have had a chance to run through quite a bit. I have played it pretty extensively, but it is only one stage of the demo. So there is plenty of stuff that I want to experiment with, plenty of stuff I want to explore, find out more about, but for the time being, from my initial hands-on time, I am thoroughly impressed with this game. I already knew it was something that I wanted to play, so admittedly I went in probably a little bit biased because it's kind of like my style of game, so I already went in thinking I was going to enjoy it, but honestly, I was very, very impressed. I love the presentation, I love the combat, I love the fluidity, and it's definitely one that I'm excited to play more of. So, that's it for the time being. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. If you have any questions, by all means let me know in the comments down below. If you've missed some of our recent videos, be sure to check out one of these ones, and stay tuned to the channel if you want to see more Wo Long.